I want to welcome to the show Tony Hollandsworth. He is the host of the Inside the Who's Your Mind podcast, the college football analyst for Wise Guys Sports. Tony, how are you this evening?
Doing great, man. How are you? How'd you enjoy the games this past weekend? Were you kind of surprised?
I was surprised a little bit, Tony. I definitely was surprised, man. There was some interesting games on championship weekend.
Oh yeah. Did you? I do got to ask real quick before we dive super deep into it. Do you agree with the college football playoff rankings?
I got mixed feelings, Tony. I got mixed feelings about it. I really, really do, and that's why I was ready to bring you on so we can kind of dive into this and I can make an opinion and make a judgment call on it, and that's kind of where we're going with it. I'm glad you brought that up. Let's get right to it. So obviously, the college football committee, the playoff committee who selects the teams to make the college football playoff, they selected the Michigan Wolverines, the Washington Huskies, we got the Texans Longhorns, and the Alabama Crimson Tide. And so, Tony, it's a lot of people in the state of Florida who are upset today with the decision to leave out the Florida State Seminoles. So what are your thoughts on the committee leaving out the Florida State Seminoles, and do you believe that they should have been in the college football playoff? And if so, who should they have replaced?
Yeah, I'm probably in the same boat as you. I was super torn when I saw it because you look at all the criteria that goes into how this CFP committee put everybody in. The biggest thing is they looked at the overall record, so the strength of your record, the strength of your schedule, which unfortunately for Florida State they were ranked 55th. They were even behind Georgia in the strength of their schedule.
Yeah.
And then the biggest and the third thing that honestly is what hurt Florida State was they look at if you have a potential coach or player that is absent or is not going to be available for game time that is going to potentially make or not make a significant impact towards the game. So that's the reason why Florida State unfortunately didn't end up getting in. I actually just saw something not too long, just earlier, that Stephen A. Smith said you can blame TCU for not allowing Florida State in because you look at what happened last year with the national championship. They got
that's where I was going next, Tony. That's where I was going next. Yeah,
Georgia.
Yeah,
I'll say this though, because you live in Ohio right now, because you're an Ohio guy, and I know you're surrounded by Ohio State fans. You remember what happened when Ohio State won the national championship back in 2015?
Yes,
they won it with a third string quarterback.
They did.
The fact they didn't even give Florida State a chance kind of bums me out a little bit. I did hear someone else bring up a really good point of there's only 4 spots. So even if all of your Power 5 conference champions are good like they were this year, somebody is unfortunately going to have to be left out. I have a personal theory. I think they looked at it as what is going to be the biggest draw, what's going to make them the most money. Alabama has been a massive brand for the last 10, 15 years as far as being dominant. They've dominated the minute that they get into the playoffs. They weren't going to put Texas. They weren't going to kick Texas out because Texas had a head-to-head matchup over Alabama and beat them. So if they did that, then they would say that the regular season essentially doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I am a little bit disheartened the fact that it also kind of shows that I don't think the CFP really respects the ACC and doesn't see them as one of those top conferences as much anymore as compared to what they see the SEC as.
Yeah, but I think the year when Ohio State won, Tony, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Ohio State blew out Wisconsin in the conference championship game. And this year, in the ACC championship game, Florida State struggled with Louisville. They only won 16-6. So do you believe, let's say Florida State blew out Louisville in the ACC championship game, do you believe that would have changed the committee and would have forced them to put Florida State into the college football playoff?
I think so, because if you look at overall Florida's schedule, they beat 2 big SEC teams. Now, albeit they beat Florida just last week in a pretty kind of limping way. They only beat them 24-15. But whenever you go down to the swamp in Florida, that's a hostile territory to have to play in. And of course, they dominated at the time number 5 LSU 45-24 to start out their season. And then they went through the ACC with no problem. So I think you're right. I think had they probably been a little bit more dominant to show that it is a complete team, that offensively, they can still make it work even with a third string quarterback. Defensively, they could even get takeaways and score on defense. If they could have done that all collectively, they would have probably made the committee think a little bit harder about what their decision was going to be. Because I kind of see why they put Alabama in. Again, I'm probably with everybody else, don't necessarily agree with it. Not the biggest fan, but I get why they did it, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually that's where I was going with it next. I heard Stephen A. bring up TCU last year, and we saw TCU get blown off the field last year by Georgia. Do you feel like the committee felt that would happen this year in the college football playoff? Like Florida State would have gotten blown out had they made the playoffs?
I don't think so, because they would have had to face Washington. And Washington is one of those teams. They've been really good. Washington has proven themselves. They beat Oregon. They ran through the Pac-12 with basically no issue. What would be interesting, though, is would Florida State offensively be able to kind of counter it? Because Florida State right now, without Jordan Travis at quarterback, or even honestly their backup, Tate Rodemaker, who didn't do great at Florida when they played, but didn't do terrible, but he just wasn't turning heads by no means. It would kind of remind me of what Iowa as a team has been this year. They have an elite defense that's one of the best in the country, but offensively they just can't move the ball. So I think they would have worried, because they would have had to more than likely go against Washington as the 3 seed, and then you would have had honestly a fantastic matchup with Texas versus Michigan at the 1-4 spot potentially, which I would have loved to see that matchup.
Now, I want to read you Mike Norvell. He's the Florida State head coach. This was his comments after Florida State was excluded from the playoff. I'm going to read it real quick, and I want your response, Tony. He said, quote, "I am disgusted and infuriated with the committee's decision today to have what was earned on the field be taken away because a small group of people decided they know better than the results of the games. What is the point of playing games? A team that overcame tremendous adversity and found a way to win doing whatever it took on the field was cheated today. It's a sad day for college football." What would be your response to that, Tony? That response to Florida State's head coach Mike Norvell's comments?
Oh, no. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly, because if you look at everything as a whole, Florida State did literally everything in their power that they could do as far as checking off every single box.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is go out there, make sure you win your games. If you lose a game, you lose control over whether or not you are going to be able to get into the playoffs or not, or you have to hope somebody else loses. So you lose all control over your situation. They went undefeated through their own conference, through outside of their conference. They beat everybody on their schedule. They did everything right that they were supposed to do. I mean, really, to him, what more can you do? You're in a Power 5 conference. You won the conference championship, albeit not in the, quote unquote, sexiest way you could win it, but you won nonetheless. It's like, what really more can you do at that point? You put in a team that you put in the SEC champion that lost to the Big 12 champion, and the Big 12 champion lost to an Oklahoma team that's now only, I believe, in the top 20s. They're not even, as high as they were when they first beat Texas. So it is disappointing, and I don't blame him. To me, I also kind of look at it, and a lot of people have probably said this. I do think there is a little bit of an SEC bias because of not only how they looked at Florida State potentially being another TCU situation of getting destroyed in the playoffs. I think they looked at historically, what has the SEC brought whenever they've gone into the playoffs? You have Georgia, the last, back-to-back national champions, absolutely ran the table. Yeah. Alabama's won multiple national titles in the CFP format. LSU won it not too long ago. So all of these SEC teams have had just dominance the last 10, 15 years. So to me, I think that also played a little bit of a factor. It's just, who does the CFP want in more that's going to, potentially draw more ratings, probably make bigger impact as far as football goes. A very talented Florida State team with essentially no quarterback, or a Alabama team that has been on an absolute hot roll since that loss to Texas.
Now, Tony, obviously Alabama beat Georgia in the SEC championship 27-24 over the weekend. Both teams finished 12-1, but Alabama beating Georgia. Do you believe that is what made a difference and kind of is what put Alabama in the college football playoff over Georgia. Like, do you believe the winner of the SEC championship would have been the fourth team in the college football playoff rankings? Whoever won it, like whoever had Georgia won, had they been in the college football playoff?
Oh, yeah. I think had Georgia won, Georgia would have probably stayed at number 1 overall because, I mean, at that point, you beat one of the hottest teams in the country. You won your conference. And it's also one of those you look at it as they didn't really do anything wrong to go down. Michigan didn't really do anything right to, jump ahead, and kind of the same with Washington. So I think Georgia would have probably stayed number 1. For Alabama on that side, this is where I do kind of see why the committee picked them. They're the number 8 team in the country. They're on a roll. And let's be realistic too. They dominated Georgia that entire game. I mean, they took Georgia all the way down to the absolute wire. Georgia just, they couldn't get a stop. They couldn't stop Milroe from being able to run the ball. Milroe was tearing them apart through the passing game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for them too, you look at it, number 8 beats number 1. Nobody had beat number 1 in 29 games except for Alabama. It's kind of hard to deny that resume of, okay, well, and your only other loss is to the team that we're going to put in at number 3. And even though I hate the term quality loss, that's about as good of a loss as you can get as far as who you get beat by.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing though, Tony. I hear you saying Alabama dominated Georgia for most of the game, but they only won by 3. I mean, it was 27-24. Georgia was in that game. They outscored the Bulldogs outscored the Crimson Tide 14-7 in the fourth quarter. It was a close game throughout. I agree with you that you could tell that Alabama, they were outplaying Georgia, but I thought the game was still pretty close for the most part.
Oh yeah, I think it was good, and I mean, I think that's a testament to just how talented and how deep that Georgia team is, as well as I think that's a testament to Kirby Smart's ability to coach. But on the same token, I would say that goes credit to Nick Saban too. Nick Saban's been doing this for 14, 15 years just with the University of Alabama, and it shows what he's able to do with his team. Because I don't know about you, the first 4 weeks when I saw Alabama play, they lost to Texas. They benched Milroe. It was like they couldn't figure out their quarterback.
Yeah,
I think they only dropped 17 points against USF of all teams. So it's like this Alabama team's done. They're dead in the water. There's no way that they're going to be able to do this. And lo and behold, Alabama proves me wrong again, unfortunately.
Now, I know this is in hindsight, but the Pac-12 championship was over the weekend as well, Tony. Washington beat Oregon 34-31, but it was a very competitive football game. Had Oregon been able to pull off the upset and beat Washington, do you believe Oregon would have possibly made the college football playoff?
That is one where I don't think they would have. And I say that because that, I believe, would have opened the door for Florida State to probably have a for sure definitive lock on being in. Because at that point, okay, well, your Pac-12 champion isn't, undefeated, but our ACC champion is. And I do think it would be a little bit of a slight of, okay, well, the Pac-12 technically isn't going to exist anymore after this game is over anyway. So it's not like this really particularly matters. So unfortunately for Oregon, I don't think it would have been good enough to even propel them into the playoffs. They would probably be sitting at the 5 spot instead of Florida State had they done that.
He's the host of the Inside the Who's Your Mind podcast. He is a college football analyst. Tony Hollandsworth is on the show tonight. Tony, let's talk about the actual teams that made the college football playoffs and the matchups. We got the Michigan Wolverines going up against the Alabama Crimson Tide, and we got the Washington Huskies and the Texas Longhorns. So with the Michigan-Alabama matchup, I was watching on Twitter, they were showing the reactions of the Michigan Wolverines once they realize that they have to play Alabama. So I know it's early. We just found out about these two teams facing off against one another. But what are your thoughts on the Wolverines Crimson Tide matchup?
I'm not going to lie. Because I'm not the biggest Michigan supporter, even though I'm here in Big Ten country, watched a lot of Michigan games, watched them all year. I don't necessarily have faith in Michigan. And I say that because the last few games that they played, especially the last 3, aside from Iowa, they only were able to score a max of 31 points. Everybody else, they let They kept it close. Maryland was a one-score game. Ohio State was a one-score game. And, of course, they dominate an Iowa team that essentially has no offense, which also kind of surprised me that they were only able to drop 26. I'm worried about Michigan because we've seen this the last 2 years for sure. They faced a Georgia team that was pretty unstoppable on Georgia's route to the first national title. They got absolutely smoked.
Yeah.
We look at last year, they faced a TCU team that I don't necessarily think they took as seriously as they should have, and they ended up getting, smacked in the mouth. They got beat. With Alabama, they couldn't have got a more battle-tested, more prepared head coach with Nick Saban in any luck of the draw. I mean, if they go up against Texas, they maybe have a little bit more of a shot, but Texas is a really big, powerful bully team who beat Alabama. Not only beat Bama, but beat them by 10 in Tuscaloosa of all places. So to me, I don't trust Michigan. I don't trust that J.J. McCarthy is going to be able to get it done. He had a extremely bad down year. And I think with Alabama's defense, they're gonna stuff that run game and they're gonna force him to throw it. And when they do, I think J.J. McCarthy is going to get exposed, and I think this is going to result in a Michigan once again a first round exit.
Now we got the Texans Longhorns. Obviously, the Texas Longhorns, they won the Big 12 championship. They are 12-1. They are facing off against the 13-0 Washington Huskies. What are your early thoughts on this Texas-Washington matchup?
I think this is going to be a good one, although I do kind of have Texas doing the same thing. I have a pretty hearty Texas win. Nothing against Michael Penix Jr. and what the Washington Huskies have done. I think he's had a fantastic year. He's one of the 4 people in the race for the Heisman right now. He had 33 touchdowns to 9 picks. But Quinn Ewers in this Texas offense, man, they're big. They bullied Oklahoma State in their championship game. They can beat you with the run. They're super deep at the running back, even with running back Jonathan Brooks out. They can beat you with the run. Defensively, they will shut you down in an absolute heartbeat. And like I said, we saw that against Alabama. Alabama could not do anything that Alabama used to be able to do to people because Texas absolutely shut it down. And even according to ESPN, right now on December 4th, obviously we're a couple weeks away. Well, actually, we're about a month away from this happening because this takes place on January 1st of next year. They have the Texans, the Longhorns favored 68% over the Huskies right now. Okay.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. Because in the Big 12 championship, the Longhorns outrushed Oklahoma State 198-31. So they were able to run the football effectively, and they were able to also throw the football. They had 464 passing yards. So that offense is really, really rolling right now, Tony.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't believe Washington has faced a team like that. Don't get me wrong. Bo Nix and the Oregon Ducks are a very prolific offense. But
I was about to say, yeah. What you think about Bo Nix and them? Yeah.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I like Bo Nix. I thought he's done great the last 2 years with Oregon, but this Texas team is a whole new beast to have to deal with. And honestly, to me, what kind of a better way to finish the season than Texas, the team that has always been this close. They have all the hype, all the potential, all the talent, but can never make it against the team that has basically ran college football for the last 15 years for potentially a national title run. And basically a part 2 matchup of who really deserved to win the first time. Did Texas really show that they're back and that they're the kings of college football, or is it still Alabama's crown to lose?
He's the host of the Inside the Who's Your Mind podcast, college football analyst Tony Hollandsworth. Tony, I'm gonna get you out of here on this last question. Who do you believe is the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy?
Honestly, I'm be a little bit biased here, because I am a massive LSU Tigers fan. I gotta go with Jaden Daniels. Over 3,000 passing yards, over 1,000 yards rushing on the ground. I think just under, if not right at, 40 total touchdowns throughout the year. LSU to, I believe, 2 double-digit win seasons. He's been absolutely fantastic for them the last 2 years. He's kept them pretty much close in just about every game that he's played in. To me, it's Jaden Daniels. Again, nothing against Bo Nix. I think Bo has had a really good season. I think Michael Penix has had a really good season. If Jaden doesn't get it, I would probably root for Michael Penix Jr. to get it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. was able to do enough this year with his quarterback play to be able to get it. If there was a CJ Stroud still there, we'd probably be having a different conversation because I think Marvin Harrison Jr.'s numbers would be up significantly. But right now, I think I'm gonna go with my biased favorite a little bit. I'm gonna go with the LSU Tiger.
Let everyone know where they can find you, Tony.
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Inside the Hoosier Mind. I'm also on TikTok, and you can find me at X, formerly known as Twitter. Took me a second there because I'm still having to get used to calling it X, man.
Me too, man. I still struggle, man. I still call it Twitter from time to time.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
You can find me there at IN Hoosier Mind.
Yes, he is the host of the Inside the Hoosier Mind podcast, college football analyst Tony Hollandsworth. Tony, thank you for joining me tonight. I'll definitely bring you on before the 2 matchups in the college football playoff. And we got plenty more to talk about. So I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, man. Congrats to your Packers beating the Chiefs, by the way. I was pretty surprised by that. And I was happy the Philadelphia Eagles took an L yesterday, and my Cowboys still have a shot to win the NFC East. So it was a good day yesterday.
Yeah, it was a good day. Yeah, it definitely was a good day. I appreciate you joining me tonight, Tony, for sure.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too.